All right, here we go. All right, everyone, welcome. Today I was going to do a little teaser. Those people that teach you how to market your services always say if you're doing a course, you should do a couple of little teasers, promos, things like that. And I've done a few for this upcoming course, which is Saturday, the NLP and the Law of Attraction. So today I was going to talk about, at least it seems like, what are the two big things that, why this stuff doesn't work, right? And why am I linking the NLP with the Law of Attraction? Law of Attraction's been around for a long, long time. Think and Grow Rich, all the work of Neville Goddard. I mean, yada, yada, yada. And it worked. The Secret, all that good stuff. And the reason I wanted to add a little bit more NLP techniques is we learn, the law of attraction, what you think you become. I've replaced the word visualize lately with Nevilize what your goals, Nevilize your goals. Because Neville Goddard talked about it wasn't enough to picture it. You had to feel it. You had to make it totally vivid, and so it's kind of cool. You can just look that up in the work of Neville Goddard. He had a really cool technique where he talked about seeing himself from the goal, right? Where he went and the example he used was he wanted to be take a cruise, because this is back before airlines, to get back from New York, or I think to get to New York he was from the Caribbean, get back to New York, or vice versa. I don't remember, but it was a round trip. And he had no money. So he started visualizing, himself. First, he was sitting in a chair, and it wasn't just visualizing. He was sitting in the chair in his living room. Oh, yeah, that's what it was. He was in New York. He wanted to go down to the islands and back, in a good cabin on a ship, Yeah, not hot bunking it for my friend Captain Billy, right? So he was sitting in his chair in his living room, and he noticed everything around him, whatever it was, right? Probably back then the radio and the chair and all the stuff so he made it visceral. Then he closed his eyes, and he knew what it was like to be on the deck of the ship, sitting in a comfortable chair, on the deck during the day, so he could feel the sun, and all that stuff, smell the ocean water, the people around him. So he could visualize the goal, and he was there, but he added the step of then visualizing himself sitting in the chair, imagining himself, seeing himself on the boat. And he would go back and forth, right? My dear friend Charlie Curtis does a really good long explanation of this. And I would imagine, since we're just thinking this stuff up, is he created if you get into that, like a time loop in his head. He was in his room, which that's where he was. Then he would imagine being on the ship, which he'd been on, so it was very real. It's easier to vividly imagine something that you can, especially if you've done it, right? And then he would jump back to being in the chair, visualizing himself on the boat, looking back on himself at the chair, and he would go back and forth. It was it's an interesting way to look at it, right? Yeah, our dear friend Joe Vitale, some of us know, right, from not just The Secret, some of us remember him from the National Guild of Hypnotists back in the early 2000s. He was always at the National Guild for probably 5 straight years teaching hypnotic writing right before The Secret broke. But anyway, so, all the people that teach the law of attraction, the rules are the same. So then it makes me wonder, because I come from on the clinical side of my work, as some of you know, is addictions, right? I was just telling Billy I'm starting to do some consulting. There's an addiction treatment center by me that's open or it's expanded. It's been around about 5 years. And I like their methodology. They actually use meditation, visualization, and some of that in their treatment of addictions, which isn't real common in a inpatient treatment center. But when I look at addictions, I'm always looking at not just what works, but then why is it you see people that go into an addiction program and, they do what's told, whatever it is, go to AA meetings, get into therapy, do this, do morning meditation, all the things they'll tell them to do. And it works. So they sober up, they get their life back. Woo, they're going good. Other people, it seems like they'll do the same thing, but it doesn't seem to work, right? Or it only works for short periods of time. So it always leads to what's the difference between the two groups, right? And there's some, I have some ideas on it. It's kind of hard to test, but some of it is what we'll talk about today. Same with and I'll tie that in with the law of attraction. We get exposed to it and maybe we've tried it a little bit and it works, or it seems to work happenstance. So if we look at that, what if we step back and look at the addiction treatment, the law of attraction, and I'll throw in physical training, right? Because you see people go to the gym, they get in shape, and then you see them 6 months later and they're back, they're fat and happy again, excuse the language, but and it seems to be these cycles. Same whether you see people go into a 12-step program or a treatment program, they sober up, they do good for 6 months or a year, and then they relapse and they're back in this circle. Same with law of attraction. Again, see people, they do this, they get into it like a lot of us do, and then it seems to fall by the wayside, right? So what are some of the mistakes that cause this gap, if you will, right? So we know the law of attraction, you're going to visualize, you vividly Neville'ize your goal. I'm trying to think of who I stole that term from. It's not mine. If I remember where I borrowed it from, modeled it from, I will let people know. So we know that, right? And so we could do that. So what stops the success? Or it's a intermittent, that's the word I couldn't think of. Yes, I'm speaking for a living and I have a conference coming up in about a month, right? A month from about now at the beautiful National Guild of Hypnotists Convention. So what's the difference? Well, if we look at it, it's not just the tools, right? We get our tools, right? For whether it's addiction recovery, the law of attraction, or even working out, there's some basic tools that seem to work, right? And, and there's different takes on the tools, but the tools are pretty standard, right? For getting in shape, it's doing some, depending on what kind of shape you want to get in, is it cardiovascular or is it muscular? There's that. This isn't that training. So we have the tools, right? So what's the difference? Same whether, addictions. Well, it's the consistent use of the technology. In the addiction world, it seems like one of the things I've noticed with people with long-term recovery, that's trackable, because you can't really track an anonymous program, by the way, because I love when people say, well, AA only has a whatever, people spit out a number, 10%, 15% success rate. My question is, well, if it's an anonymous program, how do you track it? Right? I mean, how do you track it? It's all by self. AA itself says there's no numbers of success or that, right? But it's the consistent use. And what I've seen, at least from talking to hundreds, if not thousands of people in recovery, those that develop a long-term sobriety, they do some consistent things. They're very consistent on some kind of, ritual, right? Ritual or routine that they do. In the 12-step world, in the AA world, they talk about getting out, reading some kind of literature, some kind of spiritual thing, taking a few moments to get centered and grounded, drinking your coffee as you're thinking about the day. Don't just roll out of bed, grab your phone and hit the bricks. It's take a few moments and get centered and grounded. That seems to be, you get a new routine, right? Because again, if you're coming out of the addiction world, that's usually not how you're operating first thing in the morning. You're trying to find your pants and where's my car keys and all this other stuff. So it gives you that ritual, right? A routine. And they have to do it regularly, right? Not just and those of us that do that kind of thing, it's usually you experience difficulties when you get away from the ritual or the routine, right? Now, if we look at, like, let's say the physical training, right? We see this a lot where people join a gym or start an exercise program and they notice some good results, right? They feel stronger, they get a little bit more energy, maybe they're sleeping better. And then for some reason, the same thing that happens up here can happen down here, is even though it's working, you stop doing it, right? You stop doing it. And then, of course, you could go back and blame, well, the law of attraction doesn't work, or this physical program I'm doing doesn't work, or the 12-step program doesn't work, even though you're technically not even doing what worked in the past, right? And those people that really, if you're an exercise person, a term I've heard, which I like, is it's easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape. Once you're in shape, if you keep doing it, you keep doing some stuff, you don't have to do as much to stay in shape as opposed to get in shape. Good example of that would just be, I was reading an interview with Hugh Jackman, as they're, of course, I don't know if they're totally, well, now they're halted because the Actors Union is strike. They were filming the new Wolverine Deadpool movie, right? And from when they decided to do the movie to the time they started filming, there was a long gap. Part of the gap, Hugh Jackman was on Broadway in The Music Man, and he had another 3 months to finish The Music Man. And then the other part of the big gap was, as he said, he had to get back into Wolverine shape. Now, he was doing 8 shows a week on Broadway. I've known people that saw The Music Man. He was in every dance number. It's a very active show, 13 shows a week. And he was, I think he said he was down 35 pounds from when he usually would play Wolverine. But if you're tap dancing on Broadway, you don't want to carry that, even if it's muscle. 35 pounds is a lot, 8 shows a week, da-da-da-da-da. So he had to muscle up, right? And it took him a while to get into it, right? And then someone asked him, well, but all those years you were doing that series of movies on Wolverine, it didn't take you that long. He goes, to tie in what I'm saying here, he goes, because I never got out of shape. I was still lifting weights, and the studio, they were paying for his good diet, make sure he had his trainer, and they were doing that for him, right? And he goes, I thought I was done with Wolverine, so I quit lifting weights and working out. Now he's, he did the Greatest Showman, and then he did, Music Man on Broadway. So he lost all that weight. So what it is, he stopped doing what he knew worked. Now, I think we all do that, I always ask hypnotists, when was the last time you were hypnotized? Right? And not by yourself, not self-hypnosis, which usually turns into a nap for a lot of us, right? Or at least it does for me, right? But even like, when was the last time you let someone hypnotize you, right? Or actually like got a recording from someone else, or maybe somebody you don't know, and actually went through the process, right? Because I've seen most of us got into this field of hypnosis, NLP, even coaching, because you had a technique done to you, or you experienced a breakthrough, stopped smoking, lose weight, got your stress under control, and you went, this shit is so cool, and then you went and learned it, right? Well, by learning it, it's almost like you quit doing it, right? It's almost like you quit doing it, right? And my wife hates it when I say my evidence for that is walk around a lot of conferences. There's a lot of fat hypnotists, right? And if they have the tools, it's like, why aren't you using them, right? So anyway, but we get away from doing what works, whether it's like the 12-step program, whether it's like, physical exercise, right? Those people that are, if you're an exercise fanatic, I've heard exercise fanatics say the reason I don't stop is I know how hard it is to get restarted, right? And that's one of the things we noticed. I did read about with COVID, how many people quit going to the gym and working out. And then now that it's over everywhere, right? But the gyms are open, things are going again. I work out at a Planet Fitness, and they still have, I think they said 6,000 members. but I think the guy said at least 25% haven't been since 2020. That's right before COVID. It's Florida, so you have the snowbirds, you got other factors, right? But it's easy to stop doing what works, especially if it takes effort, right? So when it comes to law of attraction, right? If you got into it, whenever you did, or you know it, right? Maybe you stop doing whatever it is. Maybe it's like working out. Maybe you need to do it daily. You need to develop a ritual, a routine, right? It's the reason, and that's what keeps your skills sharp, right? I remember a saying I heard once about you need to make, you have to do these things constantly, these rituals, these routines, right? But it's easy to get away from them, especially if there's no external pressure to do it, right? Or you've experienced some success. And I was talking to somebody when they called them and was asking about the class, and they said, they got into they got back into it. Yes, I speak for a living. They got back into the law of attraction when The Secret came out. That was what, 2005, maybe 4, 5, or 6, something like that. They've done it before, and then when The Secret came out, they started doing it again. They manifested all this really cool stuff, and then they stopped, right? The 12-step world would call that complacency. You get complacent. It's like, do I want to do the 10-minute visualization? Do I want to do the work, right? And then you start questioning. So that's, the biggest thing is that consistency. Whatever it is you're going to do, visualize, Nevillealize your goal, listen to positive, motivating things, is number one, right? Number two would be, of course, do you have any kind of block that stops you from really succeeding? Do you have any kind of trauma, because I think it's related to trauma, in your past that will stop you from succeeding? Yesterday I did a thing and several people reached out because I asked, are you the kind of person that saves stuff for a rainy day? You get yourself a treat, you keep it in the refrigerator, and then by the time you go to eat it, it's went bad because you were saving it for something special. Or you buy some kind of clothes you really like, but you're not going to wear them because you're saving it for a special occasion. And by the time the special occasion comes around, maybe the clothes don't fit you anymore, right? Or they're out of fashion. This is what happens, because maybe you get this stuff in your head when you're little, those ages between 0 and say 7 or 8. When this stuff's put in, what if you were raised with, don't wear your good clothes, don't want to, your Sunday clothes or your good go to school clothes, and because the kid will go out and ruin it, right? But it makes you begin to think, if you really like something or you really, want something, you don't want to use it, I remember when I was talking somewhere, this conversation was coming up, and the way it came up, there was a person there, and he was bragging that he had a car that had it was in the Midwest, so it was back in the 90s. I lived up there, and he was bragging that he had this car that had never seen rain or snow. And a person there who actually was into cars, they owned a car lot, and the person went, excuse my language, that's fucking stupid. It's a car. No, it makes it worth more. He goes, maybe if you hold it 50 years, but I'm not going to pay you any more if your car's never seen rain or snow, or it's been driven a lot. If you bring it in for a trade-in in the first 20 years, it's not going to mean anything. He goes, and then someone else kicked in, the person that was standing there that had a lot of money, right? That actually said, well, if you can't treat it like a car, then you don't have enough wealth to drive the car like that car. Because he goes, my friend has a Lamborghini. If you looked in the Lamborghini, you're going to see a Starbucks cup on the ground, crumpled up. Because to him, it's just a car. It's the same as someone's Toyota. You know, I've seen that when I'm walking on South Beach. You know, we're walking down the street one day and there's a couple of really, you know, South Beach, if you've ever been there. And there's a couple of really nice cars. And one of the guys looked in and goes, "That's terrible. They shouldn't be allowed to treat that car that way." And it had, like I said, there was this, you know, coffee cup on the floor, some kind of like wrapper. And someone else said, "Well, to whoever that is, it's just a car. They'll get another one, you know." So again, maybe you have any kind of block that's holding you back. Do you deserve it? Right? Neville Goddard talked about that, you know. One of his quotes was, "You don't always get what you want, but you'll usually get what you think you deserve." Right? And I'm Americanizing it and using current language. He was a much more eloquent speaker than I am, but it was like, that kind of makes sense, you know. Yeah. So do you have any blocks holding you back, you know, that stops you from getting it? And this, I see this where people get that incremental, you know, they'll get that incremental jump, right? Whenever they don't get it all the way, they get a little bit and then they'll backslide. Like, I really don't deserve this. And they get stuck in that loop. And so, you know, those are the two big things. I said I talk about the two big things, right? And also, you know, when it comes to deserve, you know, again, I've been using Neville Goddard a lot. I like his thought process. But, you know, he said, whatever your wants are, right, or your desires are, you know, is God whispering to you, right? You know, you don't get, you just, you know, you have your wants and your desires, right? And they're neither good nor bad, except your thinking makes it so, right? And he was the first person I heard talk about the fact that, like, Gavin making a lot of money does not take money away from me or Billy, right? But we have that limited competitive mindset. It's that open mindset that you know, because he talked about the other Napoleon Hill, they were around the same time. One having success doesn't impact the other, right? But we begin to think that like me succeeding, someone else won't succeed. So the big things are doing it consistently, developing a ritual, a routine, right? And don't stop doing it, right? But a lot of times that'll happen, especially if you're trying to visualize or use the law of attraction to get a goal, and then you get the goal. Of course, it's easy to pull back, right? And then looking at, could there be any blocks to you getting that goal, right? And you need to work through those. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to do in the class using the NLP techniques, you know, to make the ritual or the routine fun so it becomes part of what you do, right? And then we can also look at any blocks that you may have, and we can look at removing the blocks. So that's kind of what we're going to do, because again, it's the ritual, it's the routine, you know. And again, it's one of those, you have to develop that internal focus to get these things. So that's my little spiel on the two big reasons, right, that we sabotage our law of attraction stuff. And so if you have any questions, just reach out, and I'm going to. So that's a little bit on NLP and the law of attraction. The live class is Saturday, July 22nd at 12 noon, but then it'll be in a replay mode if you're seeing this after that date. So you can watch it whenever you want, or if you're there live, then you can watch the replays over and over again. That's Saturday, July 22nd, 12 noon. And if you have any questions, reach out wherever you're watching this. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and maybe list what is something you want to manifest in your life. I'm working on a few things, and one actually came to pass. My success story, when I started getting ready to teach this again, because it's Billy, who's on this live call, back in the 90s, I taught a lot of this at the Guild and at other hypnosis conferences. I was really into it, and I'm guilty of just life gets in the way, I'm living good. I got my place down here in Florida. Things are going good. And I kind of pulled back and I got ready to start teaching it again. And I said, well, you got to test your own work. I'm a believer in results, not theory. And so I said, what could I try to manifest? Well, I needed to go to Indiana for another reason. I said, it'd be really nice to do a movie in Chicago. They make a lot of movies in Chicago, right? And so then suddenly I start, and maybe it was the selective attention got turned on. I started seeing the auditions for things going on in Chicago, right? So I auditioned for a couple and ended up getting cast in one. And it fit the time frame I wanted to go perfectly, right? So I could go up, visit my family, do some other things, had some stuff I needed to do up there. And I figured that this studio would be in Chicago. And after I got there, I found out, au contraire, it's actually in Northwest Indiana, literally 15 minutes from where I stay when I go up north. It's like this guy opened a studio and found out he just opened it the most cost-effective place. Beautiful studio, place like you see in LA or Orlando or Atlanta. And so I got to go there and work on the film for a couple of days, hang out with my family. And it all and the entire trip went better than I could imagine. On the way up, I had going from Florida, I drove all the way to Chicago, the Chicagoland area. I hit absolutely no traffic until right where I got by my house. And then coming back, absolutely no traffic. Not in Indianapolis, not in Louisville, not in Nashville or Chattanooga or Atlanta. It was like I hit the perfect, it just was like, was an easy drive with beautiful weather, right? And so I think this stuff can work. And I'm trying to, I could tell my few success stories, but the NLP techniques are what we'll be adding to make this stuff. The term I use is more sticky. So it becomes more sticky. So if you have any questions, direct message, and I'll see you all as we trudge the road to.
Sorry, Dr. Will. I
Yes.
had a quick question. So for the class on Saturday, it's on the topic of manifesting and law of attraction.
Yes, sir. NLP and the law of attraction.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. All right, everyone. I'll see you soon.